You know that feeling when someone compliments you and you immediately deflect? Oh, this old thing, or I just got lucky. You think you're being humble. You think you're protecting yourself from arrogance. But what if the opposite is true? What if your self-criticism is the most prideful thing you do? Most people never catch this. They spend decades in therapy, in prayer, in self-help books, trying to build confidence. They're treating the symptom. The real disease is something much darker, and it's hiding in plain sight under the mask of humility. There's a passage in Proverbs that almost nobody understands the way it's actually written. It says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Everyone reads this as a warning against arrogance, against bragging, against thinking you're better than others. But read it again, a haughty spirit. Haughty doesn't mean proud in the modern sense. It means elevated, lifted up. Which direction are you looking when you're that elevated? When you have low self-esteem, you're hyper-aware of yourself. You're constantly monitoring how others perceive you. You're replaying conversations at 3 a.m., wondering if you said something stupid. You're checking your reflection. You're catastrophizing about judgment. Sound familiar? Now ask yourself, how much of your mental energy is spent on you, your failures, your inadequacies, your shame? If you're this obsessed with yourself, just in the negative direction, are you actually humble, or are you just ashamed? Here's what psychology actually found, and this is the part people don't want to hear. Low self-esteem and narcissism share the same root. They're not opposites. They're the same wound expressed differently. Both are self-obsession. Both are an inflated sense of how much your opinion of yourself matters. A narcissist thinks they're better than everyone. A person with low self-esteem thinks they're worse. But both are orbiting around themselves. Both are holding the self at the center of the universe. The ancient Christians knew this. They had a concept called kenosis, self-emptying. Not self-improvement, not positive affirmations, not even self-acceptance. Self-emptying. The idea was that the problem wasn't that you thought too little of yourself. It was that you thought too much about yourself, period. Whether that thought was "I'm amazing" or "I'm worthless," you were still trapped in the same cage. Think about the last time you were genuinely present with someone else, fully listening, not waiting for your turn to talk, not thinking about how they perceived you, not rehearsing your response. When was that? And notice what happened to your self-esteem in that moment. It disappeared. Not because you suddenly felt confident, but because you weren't thinking about yourself at all. This is why Jesus kept saying things that made no sense to his listeners. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. The disciples heard this and thought he was being poetic, but he was being literal. Blessed are those with low self-esteem? No. Blessed are those who have emptied themselves of self-regard entirely. Not negative self-regard, zero self-regard. He was pointing to something that doesn't fit into the confidence versus insecurity binary. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. If your self-esteem journey has been about building yourself up, telling yourself you're worthy, affirming your value, you might be deepening the trap. You're still at the center. You're just trying to make the center more palatable. The real movement would be stepping out of the center entirely, becoming a witness to your own life instead of the star of your own story. But the world doesn't teach this. The world teaches self-esteem because self-esteem is profitable. It's a product. Build your confidence with this course. Heal your inner child with this therapy. Affirm your worth with this app. The system needs you obsessed with yourself. Whether you obsess over your brokenness or your potential doesn't matter. As long as you're obsessed, you're buying something. You're taking the bait. Meanwhile, the people who seem to have actual peace, they're not thinking about themselves much. They're not constantly monitoring their self-image. They're not trying to be humble. They're not trying to be confident either. They're just unavailable for the performance. They've opted out.
Here's the trap, though, and this is where it gets morally complicated. If you read what I just said and think, okay, I'm going to practice self-emptying so I can finally feel at peace, you've just weaponized it. You've turned it into another self-improvement project, another way to fix yourself. You've made peace into a goal, which means you're still at the center, trying to engineer your way out. There's no technique, there's no app, there's no affirmation that gets you out of this. The only way out is to stop trying to get out, to stop managing yourself entirely. And most people can't do that because the self-management, even when it's negative, feels like control, like you're doing something. When you stop, you feel like you're failing. The actual biblical language for this is the flesh, not your body, your self-will, your constant internal project of self-protection, self-improvement, and self-promotion. Whether you're promoting yourself as amazing or demoting yourself as broken, you're still in the flesh. You're still running the operation. And here's what nobody wants to admit. Staying in low self-esteem can feel safer than letting it go. Because if you truly believed you were valuable, you might have to risk something. You might have to speak up. You might have to take up space. You might fail publicly instead of privately. Low self-esteem is actually a strategy. It's a way of saying, I'm going to hurt myself first so nobody else can. It's preemptive defeat. And it's protected you. For years, it's protected you. So when I say it's pride, I mean this. You've made yourself so important, even in your own rejection of yourself, that you've centered the entire universe around your unworthiness. That's a form of self-worship. It's an inversion, but it's still worship. The question then isn't, how do I build confidence? It's, what would I do if I genuinely stopped caring what I thought about myself? Not in a reckless way, not in a way that leads to harm, but in a way where you moved through the world responding to what's needed, not to how you evaluate yourself. You might find you're kinder. You might find you take more risks. You might find you actually listen to people instead of performing listening. You might find you're less interesting, which is probably why nobody talks about this. Here's what I know. The moment you stop trying to fix your self-esteem, it stops being the problem. Not because you suddenly feel good about yourself, but because you stop asking the question. And the question was the cage the whole time. Your self-obsession just wore a different mask.